much for coming at extremely short notice, and even myself, because today is my constituency day, back to school, so I won't keep you long. I have taken note of a story which was aired on TVJ nightly news, which made assertions regarding the return of a firearm license subsequent to an appeal heard by me. Quite frankly, I strongly reject any suggestion of impropriety and wish to make it clear that all decisions made by me while occupying the post of Minister of National Security were in the interest of that portfolio and the safety and security of all Jamaicans. I wish to share with you the facts around the issue raised and to allay any concerns while putting the matter in context. When I became minister in March 2016, I found a significant number of cases that were unreviewed, over 350. As such, I had a lawyer with a team hired to assist in the review of these appeal cases which were languishing in the ministry. This I announced in Parliament as part of my maiden presentation to the sectorial debate in 2016. Fact 1. Clauses 37 and 37A of the Firearm Act outlines the process of appeals. It explicitly gives the minister the final determination to permits for firearms. As minister, I took the additional policy decision to improve the governance of this process. I empaneled a committee of 6 persons, very senior within the national security framework, to sit as a part of an appeals panel. I did not do it alone. An important facet of this committee, empaneled by me as minister, perhaps the most important thing the country should note, is that all decisions granted to give permits after the appeals was heard had to be unanimous. No deviation from this principle ever took place. Fact number 2. During my tenure, 209 cases were reviewed out of the 350, and 29 licenses were recommended for granting by the panel. Fact number 3. The case in question involves the person discussed in the story was no different as to his appeal process. The review panel unanimously recommended the reinstatement of the license. Important to note, the license had been issued previously by the previous administration, and they subsequently revoked it. The gentleman appealed. It is the appeal that was referred to me as minister. It was not my job to clear fit and proper. Fact 4. The person in question is from the constituency of Western St. Mary that I represent. Though not relevant, I am providing all pertinent information to the country, which I can responsibly provide. Because as former Minister of National Security, there are things that reach to me that I cannot share at this point in time. In essence, providing details versus allowing rumors to run rampant. This person in question had been charged previously under the lottery scamming legislation. The charges were thrown out by the courts as no evidence was ever provided. Subsequently, the police officer who had charged the person in question was alleged to be corrupt and was separated from the police force. The person in question, the one making the appeal, subsequently became a national security asset. The information provided by him regarding the FLA unearthed scandalous issues which were associated with the entity. Proof of these issues were provided by him, and actions have been taken, including FLA personnel being fired and or arrested, along with licenses of Jamaicans being revoked. Important to note, this matter has been ventilated with the Contractor General in the past, based on an assertion from the said police officer in question. Well, ex-police officer. I must admit that I find the reporting of this story incredulous. When the ATI request was sent by Mr. Milton Walker, the person in charge of news at TVJ. The status of the individual as a national security asset was disclosed with the expectation of it being private. The process of appeals was also laid out to him in a private meeting by a senior ministry official. The reporting on this matter is irresponsible and has sent a troubling signal to other national security assets. The person in question has since voluntarily relocated outside of Jamaica because of personal security concerns, and as such, his gun license was revoked. It is my intention to compile the interaction with Mr. Walker and lodge a formal complaint with Mr. Gary Allen, the managing director of the RGR Cleaner Group, the Press Association of Jamaica, and other civil society organizations. This represents, in my opinion, at its minimum, gross journalistic irresponsibility. There must be balance between the need to report and the need to protect national security. I do hope greater clarity has been provided, and I will now make myself available to any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
Did you believe that at the time when you were then the Minister of National Security, you had the power to overrule the FLA?
It's not a matter of belief, sir. Section 37 and Section 37A gives the minister that authority and power. However, I must be clear, although I had that authority in law, I went a step further because in my opinion at the time, I felt it wasn't strong enough. So I empaneled 6 senior civil servants within the ministry, within the security architecture. And once we heard an appeal, if the vote was not unanimous, the appeal wouldn't carry.
Is there consideration to review that section of the Act which gives the minister authority to review any permits that have been turned on?
The whole Firearm Act has been reviewed and is in the final stages. When I left the ministry, was in the final stages to go through the parliamentary process.
But that's specific section.
Yes. Because the policy recommendations at the time, when I was leaving, I asked that it also be included in the review of the Firearms Act.
Review to what end?
To strengthen that provision, not to give the minister alone that authority, but to allow the minister to be guided, because as it was, as it is presently in the Act, it is the minister's discretion alone.
You know of any issue in which the review process is to take out the minister out of that?
Not that I'm aware of. When I left, I don't know subsequent to that what has happened.
Minister, you mentioned that the person in question was charged but cleared up the charges. Was that the reason the license was revoked in the first place?
No.
Can you say why?
Yes. The FLA at the time received 2 letters, 2 unsigned letters, making some allegations. And based on that, they revoked the license because the license was granted, purchase order was given, the order to get the competence certificate was done. The weapon was actually purchased, and when they came for the final license, it was revoked based on the 2 unsigned letters. During the appeals process, it was brought to bear, a number of issues were brought to bear. One, his lawyer actually made the case that in our legal system, one should face their accuser, and the allegations were not signed by anybody. In addition to that, there was suspicion as to one of the persons who wrote one of the letters, and they brought to the meeting reports to the police of threats being made to the gentleman. The receipts from the police, Stadium Police was one, and the Arokobesa Police was the other. And they also clearly at that point, once you knocked away the allegations and the person was already passed by the process as fit and proper, in the appeal process we were left with no choice.
Would you say that the purpose of giving this person a firearm license in the interest of national security, as you mentioned, was that interest to serve?
yes, the interest was served. However, I must be very clear that the person in their appeal had won the appeal on their own strengths and based on the representation to the panel.
Minister, you were a part of the panel that voted unanimously to clear the person. Did him being a part of your constituency brought any bearing on that as it relates to you?
Absolutely. And he's not the only person who came from my constituency that had an appeal. And as a matter of fact, when I met with the contractor general, that matter was raised, and why did not I excuse myself? But the law does not allow anybody else that discretion. It has to be the minister.
Or Minister, yeah, okay, Minister. So you said from March 2016 to April 2018, 209 firearm appeals, 29 cases overturned, etc. Could you just tell us a breakdown, like what are the influencing? Are there is like a common thread regarding the appeal? What are the factors?
No, each case has to be treated on its own merit. Because you will have, at the time of the revocation or the refusal, because you have to be careful, you have a revocation and you have a refusal. So at the time of the revocation or refusal, certain factors may not have been brought to the attention of the review panel and would have been brought to the attention of the appeals panel.
Or do we have more refusals versus revocations in regards
So
to...
I'm not sure at this point. Out of the 29, I am not sure.
Okay.
But the vast majority of what we looked at in terms of the review, the decision was upheld, whether it was a revocation or a refusal. Sufficient evidence, because we were looking at process. My job is not to look at fit and proper, but it's process. So if the FLA granted an approval and then revoked, they would have said the person is fit and proper, but we revoked because other information came to us. If they refused the license, it would say the person was not fit and proper from day one.
Okay, and so in relation to your call for in terms of Mr. Walker, etc., to what end? What's
Because we got a letter on the 14th of December asking some very specific questions under the ATI. A senior officer from the ministry was dispatched and they had discussions with Mr. Walker. And then we got another letter on the 20th of December where TVJ clearly said they would withhold using the information because new evidence has reached them. However, they wanted to partner with us so that at the conclusion of the case, they would be given exclusivity to the story. Then another letter came on the 5th of March, making reference to the 14th of December letter, but not of the 20th of December. And the ministry responded by email to point out that we got a letter dated the 20th, and there were certain conditions in that letter. Now, we have to be mindful that when persons come forward to the national security architecture to provide information, we have a duty of care to give some level of protection. Because we live in a high crime society, and a lot of persons are hesitant to come forward to give information. We therefore have a duty, and when the state takes a journalist into its confidence and share confidential information, one would expect that it would be treated in a certain way.
But why was, I would say, standard procedures not followed in terms of writing back to TVJ versus dispatching a senior person from the ministry to share information with them in order to get an understanding?
Well, it's just a matter of choice. And so the official went, they had a discussion. Remember that in the whole national security architecture, some things are done one way, some things are done the other way. And in the whole process, you have persons who operate that don't necessarily want to be known. And you have to respect that. And therefore, but what is important is that contact was made and information shared. And any journalist, I am sure, will have their sources. And you have a duty of care to protect your source. That being said, can I invite you all for some refreshments?
Rain or fall.
That is why I invite you for refreshments.
All right.
All right. Thank you all very much. Again,